Heyn has lived for his whole life, I think. Has a sawmill and has an affair with a motorcycle. And, being a veteran and working for peace is near and dear to his heart.
Thank you all for having me come and spend a little time and describe essentially my life. My name is Chuck Heyn, and I did grow up here. I was born in Calhoun, New York, the old hospital. And but I lived in a little village called Abrahamsville. It's about 5 miles the other side of the bridge in Pennsylvania. So Calhoun was my town where I grew up as far as doing things. Although I was kind of a loner and I just spent a lot of time with my brother just doing things out in the wild growing up. So it took me a while to be more town-like. So anyway, I appreciate being able to discuss with you something that has been so sorry, so dominant in my life. Since I was drafted into the Army in 1966, that issue is war. My war was in Vietnam. But I have come to believe that every war is my war. And that every war is your war as well. There are two things. First is war is by far the worst of man's rotten ideas. And second, I firmly believe that we can do away with the need of war. Today, I'll be talking about my experiences in war and their lifelong effects. I'll be talking about my efforts to stop wars, and I'll talk about joining with Veterans for Peace and its many projects to stop war and the causes of war. Then we'll have some time, I guess, for questions at the end, and we can talk about what your thoughts are. Is that okay with you? Okay. So I was born in Calhoun, grew up in Pennsylvania, in Abrahamsville. I went to a one-room grade school up until 6th grade, and I ended up graduating in high school in 1964 in Damascus. In February of 1967, after graduation, I attended Penn State for a 2-year degree in electrical engineering and ended up getting a job with Xerox. Was there for about 2 weeks working on the first fax machine. I was running heat tests for the copying part of the fax machine. And I got my draft notice on July 4th. So I never did receive my first paycheck. So I went through basic training, and then on to medical training. I was one of 2 people in my platoon of trainers that ended up going to Fort Sam Houston in Texas for medical training. And then I went to jump school. The whole big story of why I ended up going to jump school, and it really didn't come out to help me in any way. because I ended up in Vietnam, 1967, as a combat medic with the 101st Airborne. I extended my time there for 3 months during TET, which was in 1968, because we didn't have enough medics. At that time, the medic life expectancy was about 3.5 weeks. I left Vietnam in 1968. It was a hard decision again. I extended my time because I just couldn't leave because we didn't have enough medics to fill the roster. But I did end up moving out in April because my service was ending and I needed to either re-up my whole service or to stay, and I didn't do that. I was really unaware of how deeply Vietnam had changed my life. Coming home was so hard. There were visits, but it took 4 years for me to actually come home. I had the luxury of having another Vietnam vet, and his parents allowed me to stay in their house in Concord, California, in the Bay Area, as long as I wanted to. As long as I did my own laundry and cleaned up, and I had that room. And that was a blessing that they allowed for other vets who came through their door. So the times that I did come home were short visits. One I remember quite well was for Christmas in 1968. And it coincided with deer hunting. And so I was a deer hunter. And one morning got up and got out and was roaming the ledges behind our house. Because I knew it was a good spot for deer to be laying down. And it was snowing, light snow. It was just perfect. Wind was in the right direction. And I just came upon this buck, and it just stood there on the ledge. And it was, so I pulled up and I shot that deer, and I went down and I went over to that deer. And what ensued was something I just couldn't control. I got so angry at that deer. I blamed that deer for me shooting it, for not moving, for getting on. And I beat that deer. I took my rifle, I broke its horns off. I got down and I used my fists and beat that deer so hard. And I don't know how long I was there, but it all ended at some point, and it just sort of stuck with me that why did that happen? So that's just the But there is one thing I will say, that sometime in 1969, I had the benefit of hearing Dr. King's speech that he gave in New York City at Riverside Church. I think it was 1967. I was in Vietnam during that time, didn't know anything about it. I was also in Vietnam when he was killed in 1968. He captured what I had experienced and confirmed that I wasn't crazy. His references to young black men fighting in the far-off countries reminded me of a black soldier in my platoon who saved my life. We were in a firefight, and it seemed like we were losing the end, and he got up with his M60 machine gun and charged, firing at a bunker that was keeping us down, and took it out. And he himself had no injuries, and it was just a miraculous thing, and something that always sticks with me. I first started protesting nuclear weapons proliferation in the early 80s. During the Contra Wars in 1987, I went to Nicaragua to pick coffee as part of an international brigade to help with the harvest, but mostly to provide human shields against Contra attacks on the local villages. It was an effort, universal effort around the world, and people were coming from all over. The important part of that for me was that it was a way of possibly stopping a war. And it also helped me to resolve some of my involvement in Vietnam. 1981 came the first Gulf War when I was standing over the stove making spaghetti for my kids, who were about, 7 and 5. And I just don't know how, but I just started crying in that spaghetti over the stove, and the kids were just couldn't understand what was going on. And today, I guess I can't either. So there are these little kernels of things that happen to me that just keep pointing in the right direction. I'm not sure when I met David Klein, a Vietnam vet, but through him, I was also introduced to Veterans for Peace. But I knew right away that I wanted and needed to be a part of that. Stopping wars was the mandate. Preventing wars was the goal. Dave, who had been president of Veterans for Peace from 2000 to 2006, would soon die of Agent Orange. He also was the same age as I and was in Vietnam at the same time and had 3 Purple Hearts. He was wounded 3 times. Veterans for Peace grew in numbers. Vietnam veterans found their voice again against war. It grew its ranks by welcoming non-veterans as associate members. Chapters all over the country carry the legacy of veterans who oppose wars, all wars. Understanding the root causes of war was paramount. Inspiration came from members like the historian Howard Zinn, a World War II bombardier, who wrote about his misgivings about being part of the firebombing of Dresden and other cities in Germany. When 9/11 happened, Veterans for Peace was on the streets, all hands on deck. We opposed the beginning of the Afghan war, we opposed the Iraq war, and vigiled in front of the White House for days. Many people were arrested. It was a needless war. Based on a lie. It was our president's war, all of it, until we re-elected George W. Bush a second term. Then it was our war. I fell into a deep depression. I had nowhere to go. Everything closed in on me. This may sound crazy, but I decided that the only place for me where there was no bullshit was with the troops. My body was strong, yet I was still running. I was only 58 years old. And in 2005, I started the process of re-enlisting in the Army. In July, the only thing left was the physical. And I knew I could pass that, so I would be in the National Guard, and going in as a medic, I had to be retrained and go through the facility to do that. But my goal was to be on the front lines with the troops. It was time to tell Andrea, my wife of 25 years. It was the way we were on the way to an annual reunion that we go to with guys that I served with in Vietnam. So I had to tell her the whole story, and needless to say, it landed like a bombshell. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but it was much worse. I knew that I would lose her. She could not tolerate, and I wouldn't expect her to, having me in a combat zone. Somewhere in my mind, that was the price I was willing to pay. I knew that it was extremely selfish of me. I could feel hurt in the air. But I knew that the place I needed to be was with my guys on the ground, being there for each other. In the end, I agreed to do some therapy until Christmas. And from that came my decision to not re-enlist and stay in therapy. And that's when I turned to the VA in 2010 to get more help. And VA has been extremely essential to so many vets. For their therapy sessions that they give and their informal rap sessions, and of course the excellent medical care that I still receive. Even there at the VA, Veterans for Peace are at the forefront of making the VA a better and more responsive service for vets. Veterans for Peace Save Our VA, SOVA, is a national campaign and seeks justice for veterans and advocates for strengthening the Veterans Health Administration and stopping the move to privatize veterans' health care. This is one of the things that Veterans for Peace is involved in, and there are many others. If at the end of this, if you want to take a look at those T-shirts in the back, and each of them have what Veterans for Peace has been involved in, and during their convention time, they talk about those issues and bring them to the fore. So just a few things. One of the projects that developed was called the Golden Rule Peace Boat Project. And what it amounted to was there was this sailing boat that was used by the Quakers back in the days of testing in the South Pacific. And that was scuttled by the authorities, and somebody brought it back to life. And they refurbished it, and now it's set sail and it sails around the world as Veterans for Peace, and promotes the what's called the Golden Rule, sailing across the. It's been to Okinawa, it's been to South Korea, it's been all over the United States through all the waterways and towns, and it's a great advocate for. Peace. VFP also is into the climate crisis and militarism projects. They seek to mobilize veterans and the general public and push the Pentagon to report and reduce its enormous greenhouse gas emissions, and to push Congress to redirect tax dollars to respond to the existing threat of climate change. The national project builds on previous work by VFP's War and the Environment Working Group. So there are many more issues that they tackle that relate to stemming the tide of war. And Another one is they put out a well-researched, carefully thought out, and updated statements on every conflict around the world. It offers support and help for active duty military worried about refusing EU orders and about repercussions for exercising their First Amendment rights. To express their opinions and to their Congress members. It's circulating a student pledge that they will not work for military suppliers. And that's a big issue related to this, is just the amazing amount of arms that are produced in the world and how they move around and where they go and who gets them. Just figuring out that whole system would be a great way of slowing down the efforts for making war. So I thank you for listening, and I can take some questions, and we'll have discussion.
Good question. I'm aware, Chuck, that you travel a lot on your motorcycle to visit other veterans. I don't have a clear picture of whether that's part of an organized effort or your own personal mission to do that. But could you tell us a little about that?
Yes. It actually started when I happened to be at some sort of a cookout thing at another vet's place. And I heard this conversation, and it turned out to be that there was a guy who was in my platoon when I first got in country. And we didn't really know each other then, but we knew each other when we started going to this reunion that I've gone to over the years. And turns out that he was a really good friend to my senior aide man, who is in the left side of that photo in the back. And we both realized that we were mourning his death in the same fashion. And the connection made was that he rode motorcycle and I did not. But I had visited my senior aide man, Lonnie Butts is his name, and I visited his family. Andrea and I went down to Alabama, and we were so gracious. I just didn't know what to expect. And this was in 1989 maybe, or something like that. I can't remember exactly, but it was a long time after Vietnam. And we got to know his family, we got to meet his mother and his brothers. He had two brothers that were also in Vietnam. One of them escorted his body back. They were in Vietnam together. So Dewey, who I met, could never do that. And he was the one that was charged with going in and rescuing him from a firefight. He was wounded, and they choppered him and his squad in to get him out. And he failed at his mission in his eyes. He got him out, but he was hit several times while he was getting carried. And so he could never go and tell the family how their son had died. And so he said, well, if you learn how to ride a motorcycle, since I'd been there, he would go and we'd go together. And that's what put me into motorcycle riding. That's what we did. It took a year for me to get up to snuff to be able to do that. And we got together and we went down, and unfortunately his mom had died before we got there, so he didn't get to meet the mother of Dewey, or Dewey didn't, but he got to meet the brothers, and we hung out and talked, and particularly his sister, because they found out about his death on his sister's sweet 16 birthday party. That's how she was at her party and told her about her brothers. Yeah. So that was a whole thing that turned, into a good story, connection, and we've since have met up with them after that place. But I learned how to ride motorcycle, and I found I liked it. So then I turned that into going and checking out other vets that I served with. So that's what I did. I spent a whole year about 2 months riding. And the thing about Vietnam vets is that you find a place that you can't find them. They're in the back hinterland somewhere, and and so it took me a while to find. I found 7 on my trip, and all those are now dead. We're dying out. So, but I continued riding motorcycles because then I turned it into a trip. Every 2 months, I would go out and just sleep by my bike and ride every day and go through little towns and discover why one town seems to be doing well and 18 other ones are just not boarding up. Nobody's around. The only thing they have is a gas station, a Dollar General, and a post office. So that's been my quest, is figuring out why some towns seem to be able to regain themselves. And if you want to know, I got a couple of reasons. One of them is that, one, people who grew up there wanted to get out of there, they left, and they did whatever they did, and then they come back, and they want to build back. And so it's you that have come back, coupled with getting help from investment. There's always somebody in town that has money. There's a lot of people that don't. And getting those two things together is what the crux is. And that's what I find anyway, is that when you can pair it up and then you create things that bring people together somewhere in the town. And by doing that, people get to know one another. And so there's a bond there that happens, and it's amazing how many towns have made that their ability to come back and thrive. So that's I'm still riding.
I wanted to ask about PTSD. It seems like it took the VA and maybe just the whole medical establishment a long time to acknowledge or discover or learn how to deal with PTSD. You want to say anything about that?
Well, you're very right about they were very slow to take, and really slow. And in 2010, when I entered the VA, was probably at their peak of having figured it out and were on the way up. And so that was 2010.
Yeah.
But now they're excellent. I mean, they really are. I still talk to people who are guys that are using the VA for that, and they go out of their way to figure out a way that's going to help you, not any program, not specifically, but it's always oriented towards that person, because everybody's different. Everybody has a need that's different than the next guy. Generally, it's the same, but it's not. And so they work with people really well. And so that is uninteresting. But how many years?
So are the modalities?
1975 when we left Vietnam.
So are the treatments involve medication, just therapy?
Yes, it's more therapy and therapy with small groups,
Mm-hmm.
but it's less if they're now switching out of the drugs,
Mm-hmm.
which is what they did before. Just, take this, and there was no connection at all. It was just, and medications just were abominable because they were very, um, what worked for somebody did not work for somebody else. You know, I don't know the chemical stuff related to it, but that was the big problem, was that you couldn't, it wasn't a fix all for everybody. And so it was terrible. No doubt about it.
Shane, that's me.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, one of my men that work for me, I think he did 2 tours of duty in Afghanistan, I think in Iraq, and he's very sick now, and I think he has cancer. I'm pretty sure it's cancer. What do you think there's any relationship between that illness and his tour of duty in those 2 places? Could there have been any way? I mean, he's a young man and he was very healthy, and suddenly he's wasting away. Do you know of any other vets that are suffering that way, and could they be related to anything that he did in the service?
So can you tell me the time that his service was? I mean,
What did you say?
when was the time of his service and where?
He was in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's all I know. Whenever that was, I mean, he's 50 some years old now. So whenever that.
There's just been an acknowledgement. Well, it's always been on the table, but those effects that the Iraq-Afghanistan vet has had due to the burn piles. And in that war, they burned everything, and a lot of electronics, a lot of batteries, all that stuff was, and the downwind side of that was horrid for vets. And I know that for sure because my nephew died because of that brain tumor. He never did get recognized, but now there's an actual mandate that veterans be screened, and once they discover their space, where they were, and what units they were in. Same thing with Agent Orange. It took a while for them to just assume that it could be a problem for them. And that assumption was the thing that got PTSD its notoriety among vets finally. And so it's the same with the burn pit thing. It's going to have to build momentum, but it's legal now. It's in the books, and they should check with their VA administrator. If they just go to the county, the person in your county that can direct you how to move and get the help.
Thank you very much, because he needs the help now. It's getting to be a very, very dire situation. It's very sad. Yeah. Terrible. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Listening to your story, and thank you, by the way, for sharing your story.
Yeah, sorry about that.
And please don't apologize, because I spent in the 90s, my uncle was 92 years old. He was deaf and he was blind. He was a veteran of the Second World War. And for all the years I knew him, I knew he was in the Army. I knew he fought valiantly. I knew he fought the whole war. He was drafted in 1941 and stayed until he was told he served in the South Pacific. So he didn't know the war was over until it was over. But in all those years, try as we may, he would never talk about the service. He just would say, nope, I'm not talking about it. And I wouldn't say he was stoic, but I knew that there was some floodgate that was preventing him from moving on. So at the end of his life, in a diner in a little town called Pompton Lakes, New Jersey, I had a conversation with him because I was, I guess, over my skis somewhat and thinking this might be the last time I can get something out of him. You know, he was blind and his deafness was somewhat ameliorated by the hearing aid, so he got through. And I asked him in the middle of the diner about if he could share anything, because I was not just curious, but I wanted him to be able to feel unburdened. You know, I just felt he was so locked up.
Yeah.
And what transpired was truly a God-given miracle, really, because unbeknownst to me, the whole diner was listening. Right? And because he was deaf, I did speak up louder than I should have,
Sure,
obviously, but that was. And at first he waved me off and he said no. And I said, well, let me just ask for this, because you don't seem to want to tell me anything, and that's okay. He just would wave me off. But every year he would go down, take a bus, because he didn't like driving far distances, and go to Florida and meet someone called Johnny, who all we knew was he was his service buddy. And then he would come back, and that would be, just not talked about. So I thought I would hone in on that particular thing to see if I could, just get anything out of him. And what he told me was something I didn't want to hear. Don't ask the question if you don't want the answer. He said Johnny and he were the two surviving people in his platoon. The rest had been, under. And not knowing much about, or not, I shouldn't say that, most of us knew about the European theater very well, but we didn't know much about those that fought in the South Pacific. At least in my growing up, it wasn't really, you didn't talk about in school or anything else. And he talked about the war in a way that I think was duplicated somewhat in Vietnam, because it was a different kind of war altogether. And so he was a different kind of service person coming out than the others that served in Europe,
Right.
in my opinion.
Oh, yeah, no, I'm sure it was.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking about now is that I don't know how the military addressed that, or if they have addressed it with those veterans or anyone else. But when I went to work at a company in the 80s, the veterans there were all had come from Vietnam. And every year in October, they would gather, and they had jackets that I didn't know. I thought they were in motorcycle group, but it turns out it was their platoons that they had the jackets from. And they too reiterated their kind of camaraderie with what had happened in the Civil War with those in the Pacific. So my commentary is that the fact that you are sharing this is really a blessing for all of us who have no idea whatsoever. And, it's surface like is that conversation with my uncle was so many years ago. It stayed with me. At the end of his life, he decided to break through and share that tiny little bit, as if, I didn't deserve to have that, this grace that got me through it. And the diner afterwards, after we had this conversation, said, from now on, he doesn't have to pay anymore. And I came back a couple times, and that was, again, I don't even have to put it in more words and say that those are something very outside. In my family, two people served. I had an uncle on my father's side and an uncle on my mother's side. So I have somewhat of an idea, but many people don't have anyone that served in the family, and I don't want to get political at this point, but one that comes to mind is the Trump family. No member of that family has ever served anywhere. Not in here, not in Europe. So the fact that you have shared that with us makes us more sensitive, makes me want to think about ways I could go out and help. Thank you.
Well, you point out that people who have gone through wars tend to, they tend to just hold it in, and they don't ever talk about it. And I have family that's the same thing happened. I could never figure out why my uncle who was in the South Pacific, he was a corpsman. And I always thought it was because he was a corpsman and I was a medic, same thing. But he had to deal with Marines. Corpsman Marines was not good. But nonetheless, he It wasn't until he died that my cousin found information in a box of his stuff that he not only was in the South Pacific, but he was in the Korean War as a corpsman for the Marines on the ground. So he had two things. And nobody knew that either. It's just, we never talked about it. Other questions? Tom.
Another question. Just thank you for coming here today and sharing your personal story, your personal experience. Thanks so much.
Yeah, I certainly did not end up making all the dollars I was going to make working for Xerox and settling down and the whole family, it just never happened. But I love my family that I have now, and I have two great daughters, and they've been through this with me, and so it's been reasonably well. I've been open for the most part. You don't get into the grisly stuff anymore than you have to, but war is just not something that we need to perpetuate and fund and all that. We just need to figure out a way. And we will, because we're just global now. We really are. I mean, we resisted that, the whole. And so I think, at some point it's going to come. And hopefully anyway. So hang in there.
There's one more question online.
Oh, yes.
Hi, thank you so much. It's not so much a question, but thank you for sharing your story. My dad was in the military, and he was Korean, Vietnam, and out in Japan too. And he didn't talk about it, but he always had a bracelet he had made. It was like a metal, small, thin cuff with some names on it. And I think that was one of his groups that he was with, in memory of them, of serving with them. So, but he wouldn't talk about it with me. And I have to say that all my friends who served in the Middle East and my stepmom who served in the Middle East died very young with cancer. So none of them are living right now. And it was a high number of people that I knew. So that's been really sad to say goodbye to them in such horrible, horrible ways. But I wanted to thank you for sharing your personal experiences. I feel really honored that you felt comfortable to do that with us, and thank you so much.
I just have one short question. I have always felt that the military, that people that serve in the military are the largest group of people that are used by our country and other countries. Is there a sense of not feeling comfortable being called a victim? You know what I'm saying? Because I don't see how anybody with normal function or near normal function can experience a war. I've never. But I don't see how anybody can and come out okay. And our countries, our governments do this to people. And I just see all the military as victims, as well as brave, courageous warriors in many ways. And I just want to know, is that in any way offensive to a veteran to say that you're a victim? Or, because there's a lot of stuff about that, Don't call me a victim, I'm not a breast cancer survivor, I'm a victim, I'm a blah, blah.
Yeah, I don't think it should be the first words out of your mouth when you meet somebody.
Right.
It's better. But with due course, I think it's not, it is an accurate statement though. 'Cause we are. And we're, as they say, cannon fodder back in the day. But, but it's shielded. Everybody is shielded from that. Unless it's somebody in your family or maybe buddies get together. But, you know, I stayed away. I mean, I went to the mountains. I spent 4 years in the Northern California, that's backpacking the mountains and the ocean. But it was always there for me. It was always, I couldn't escape it. I couldn't. And, I survived suicide attempts on the coastline of California. There was this great, you could walk it back then. You didn't have to. And I would just backpack and walk the coastline from San Francisco to Oregon. And I found this place where the ocean had carved out a channel back into the mountain. And, you go down and you're on the surf at low tide and you can walk back and find these little caves and that kind of thing. And at night I would sit on the bluff looking out over Vietnam. Just like I just sat there thinking about my guys that night and then so that was a bad thing for me to do because I was alone and so I found one of these that if you go back in when it's low tide and then you just wait and then high tide comes and then it's full of water. So it's I thought it would be a great way to deal with my shit. Sorry for language. But fortunately, when the water got up to a certain height, there was something that happened in me that I had not even thought about. And that's that survival thing that comes about. And I ended up swimming out, but it took a while because the tide was coming in and I was swimming out and I couldn't hold my breath long enough. I had to come back in. I wasn't back in and out and in and out. And then, all of a sudden I went out and the tide, and it was going the other way. I don't know if it was a sequential thing. I don't know anything about it, but it took me and helped me and I made it out. Got banged up on the rocks a bit. There was all of these things. They all were markers. And I just don't know how I survived, and I'm glad I did. And I talk to people every time I get a chance. Anything on my rides. So thank you for allowing me and putting up with my bit of a.
Thank you very much.
There is a handout back there, 8x11, that has some stuff about each piece. There's a pile of it there. If you want to take one, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So we're gonna do the great lesson one last time, and we're going to segue into there's no way to peace. We can never make the world safe by dividing it. Every nation, 578, 61, follow us. Every nation of the we'll start over. We can never make the world safe by dividing it. Every nation must learn that the people of all the nations are the children of God and the shepherds of the world. We can never make the world safe by dividing it. There's no way to peace Peace is the way, no way to peace. Peace is the way, no way to peace. Peace is the way. There's no way to peace. Peace is the way, no way to peace. Peace is the way, no way to peace. Peace is the way. We can never make the world safe by fighting. There is no way to peace. Peace is the way. One last time for emphasis. We can never make the world safe by fighting. Peace is the way. There's no way. Peace is the way. There's no way to peace. Peace is the way. No way to peace. Peace is the way. No way to peace. Peace is the way. There's no way to peace. Peace is the way. No way to peace. Peace is the way. No way to peace. Peace is the way. Thank you so much, Chuck, for sharing your personal story. And the thing that we all need to remember is that our bodies have such wisdom. And so, and also when we are releasing tears, we are releasing truth. So it just kind of shows us how much we can store in our bodies and how much it's really important that we share our stories and that we listen to stories of others. That is the way to peace. So we will extinguish our chalice. With that in mind, there's no way to peace. And peace is really sharing our stories and telling our most vulnerable truths. And so thank you. Lots of goodies in the back and T-shirts to look at. And thank you so much, everybody online. And thank you.
Thank you, Lori.